I've got my DSL jury-rigged to the conduit directly outside of my house. So, okay, that being said, I wanted to talk to everybody about two of the most toxic words any man can hear. And those words are man up. Now, that's not always the case, but in many cases, in many cases, those words are incredibly destructive. And what do I mean by that? A little bit of background. 5 months ago, my 7-year relationship came to a very bad end after I found out she had been cheating on me. During that time period, I was a stay-at-home father, and just working with the hand of cards I was dealt. I live in an area that's very low income, and as far as the job market is concerned, it's not the best. The job I had been working, I was delivering parts for an auto parts company, and I was guaranteed that it was a position where my hours would not be cut down. I was at odds with my old manager, and there was a night when our son was pushing a 103-degree fever. We took him to the local emergency room at 11 p.m. I did not come home with him until close to 4 a.m., and I was expected to be at work at 7:15 a.m. to drive around all day delivering auto parts up and down a busy section of Route 113, and Route 13, I should say. So it's two different routes I would have had to have driven on. I called out of work. My manager told me not to worry about it, and not even a half an hour after he told me not to worry about it, he's calling me in, and at that point in time, I had said to him, look, I'm in no condition to drive. Do you really want me to risk my safety to drive brake pads and, various other auto parts around when I can't even see straight? I mean, I would be a danger to myself, let alone others, because, complete and total lack of sleep that night with a sick child. And I come into work the next day, they're working on the schedule, and he had cut me down to 11 hours. And then I found out the next week I was only going to be working 7 hours. Came home, spoke to my ex. She told me to do something that I'd never done before and to go ahead and quit my job. She had just managed to get a job at the local chicken plant, and it was a guaranteed 40 hours per week plus. So we were going on her income for a bit, and in order to save on the child care costs, I became a stay-at-home dad. Worked my ass off. The house was clean, our son was fed, clothed, I was taking him to doctor's appointments, to surgeries. He had 2 eye surgeries, he had 2 dental surgeries, and, when it came down to that, he didn't miss a doctor's appointment, didn't miss a dentist's appointment, and I thought I was doing well. Flash forward to about 2 weeks before everything hit the fan, and I noticed she's acting weird. And she's spending more time at work. She's coming home 2.5 hours, 3 hours later than she normally would have. And finally, I asked her if she was cheating on me. And she told me, this is not a conversation I want to have with you right now. So right there's my verification that my gut instinct was right. The next morning, she gets up, and that's the first thing I ask her. I said, are you cheating on me? And she's like, Jerry, I don't want to talk about it. So I continue to push the issue, and finally she said, yes, I am. And what got me was not even a week prior to the admission of everything, the guy was over at our house, acting like a friend, playing joking hazard, being buddy-buddy with my son, and she kicked me out of the house because everything was in her name, and she wanted the boyfriend to come over. It did not affect me in a very positive way. I was absolutely distraught over everything, Some of the things she and I encountered during our relationship that usually would strengthen a relationship. We had a miscarriage. We had a stillbirth. She had another miscarriage. All this before we had our son. Um, it's really hard for me to talk about these things. I mean, in 7 years' time, death was such a huge part of my life. My stepfather passed away, my mom passed away, and emotionally, I couldn't handle it. It had gotten to the point where after the stillbirth, I was tending to her needs but not my own, and I ended up having a nervous breakdown, and I voluntarily hospitalized myself, and I did that strictly for my well-being. Um, and I was hospitalized for a week. She was in another state because things had gone bad where we were staying, and I don't know. I guess maybe part of me will admit that I kind of rushed things along. Maybe I should have stayed in the hospital a little bit longer because I was around a group of people in that state that were always telling me to man up. They were invalidating my emotions. They were telling me that nobody wanted to hear it, nobody had time for it. Grow up, nobody gives a shit. And when you're dealing with depression, and as I found out recently, post traumatic stress disorder, and these things are ripping you apart emotionally, the last thing you need to hear from somebody is man up. And the last thing you need to hear is that your feelings do not matter, and that because of the fact that you're a man, you should not have these feelings. Um, I am not a mindless drone. I am not some meat sack that has no feeling whatsoever. I'm a human being, and I do feel feelings. Um, and for the most part, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I like to laugh. I like to make others laugh. But there are times when that mask has to come off, and I need to be able to express what I'm going through when I'm going through it. And if I'm not allowed to do that, then, I do what so many other men do, and I bottle it up, and eventually it comes to a head. And my problem is that I am self-destructive in a lot of ways. I mean, it's no big secret. You guys notice that I'm sitting here smoking a cigarette, and I started smoking because of my life at home, because I wanted to get in trouble, and because of the fact that I had a mother who was emotionally numb, due to the fact that she coped with her problems with prescription pain medication. I loved my mother. I loved her dearly, and I still love her to this day, even though she's no longer with us. But my mom did not cope with her demons in a proper manner, and it affected me as an adult. It affected my siblings, and it affected the nuclear family as well. And it's just chaos is an understatement. That's what I lived. My everyday life was chaos. Chaos would have been bliss in comparison. And I'm just getting to that point now where I'm 35 and I'm finally starting to find my place in life. I've been a caretaker most of my life. I was 14 raising siblings. I was being told that if you didn't, or if I spoke a word of what went on in my house with my mom's problems, that Child Protective Services would be getting involved, and my siblings would never see each other again. And at that point in time, I remember there was a case that was brought up against Child Protective Services regarding a family who was taking care of twin boys. The foster parents ended up killing one of those boys and stuffing him in a barrel in their closet, and they left the other boy by himself while they went out to Las Vegas or Atlantic City. It was one of the two places, but they decided to go gambling. And that put the fear of God into me. That was something that would be brought up, look at the boy in the barrel. And that caused a lot of anxiety with me. and that caused me to have flashbacks. Not to mention some abuse I'd suffered when I was only 8 years old. And going to sleep is a going to sleep is a chore. I do have night terrors, and there is a difference between a nightmare and a night terror. For me, a night terror is reliving a past traumatic event anytime I close my eyes. I've been in counseling for over a year. I've got a great counselor, and in my case, I feel I'm lucky, as crazy as it sounds, to be getting the help that I so desperately needed. But there are so many of us out there that are too proud to admit that they need the help, that are told that if we get help, we're somehow less than. And it's an antiquated mindset. It's an evil mindset. And you shouldn't be enforcing those beliefs on somebody who, for all you know, is a decent person, but is struggling with some serious demons on the day-to-day. And that was something that I experienced firsthand. So those two words, man up, are possibly the worst thing you can say to a guy who is going through some shit and really needs somebody to reach out to. Pardon me. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if you know somebody who's obviously having a rough time, particularly a guy, think about this. The average suicide rate in America is much greater among males than it is females. And we're kind of at this point now where social media is a big thing. If somebody is saying something on social media, then they're just grabbing for attention. And more often than not, that's not the case. I mean, yeah, you do have some people who treat mental disorders as a popularity contest. But believe me, as somebody who has mental disorders such as depression and PTSD, I would not wish these on my worst enemy. This is not a popularity contest. This is not a bandwagon we are all trying to hop on. And if somebody is saying something to you, it's because they're reaching a breaking point and they need somebody to talk to. And those 5 minutes taken out of your busy schedule could mean the world to that person. More often than not, that's all we need, is a shoulder to lean on. Try to be that shoulder, folks. With that, I'm going to leave you. You be good to yourselves, be good to one another. Much love. I'm signing off.